Hello, my friends. I have four big stories for today. It seems like the axis of autocracy is just on the move, and they are emboldened by lack of action. China has launched a large-scale military drill around Taiwan, practicing precision strikes on key targets. Now, they didn't actually attack Taiwan, but they're threatening Taiwan, and they talk about it like this. The Joint Sword 2024B maneuvers, Chinese fighters, jets, and warships have begun encircling the island, practicing blockading and taking control of key ports. China's People's Liberation Army said it was a, quote, stern warning to separatist forces, unquote, seeking independence for the island. Well, the island's always been independent. There's never been a question about that. China never actually controlled Taiwan from the time that China went communist under Mao. Taipei called Beijing's actions a provocation and said it had sent relevant forces in response. So that's what's happening in between China and Taiwan, and it's a pretty sad thing to know that it's happening largely because the Chinese are feeling emboldened by the lack of support that they see in other places. Here's a little bit more about it. China launches war games around Taiwan. According to Reuters, China's military launched a new round of war games near Taiwan on Monday. It's a legitimate and necessary operation for safeguarding state sovereignty and national unity, they say. From what? Taiwan's not any threat of invading China, but yeah, okay. Chinese warship formations, destroyers, and aircraft are approaching Taiwan from different directions, focusing on combat patrols and blockading important ports. At the same time, Taiwan considers these actions to be serious provocations, and more tensions appear. He concludes with this line, and I thought this was brilliant. More and more tension points appear in the world the longer global institutions pretend to look the other way. That's exactly it. That's spot on. Perfect. Now, according to Reuters, it looks like the war games have just ended. China ends the war games around Taiwan, but leaves the door open to more. So it was short-lived, but it was still kind of throwing their muscle around and showing Taiwan who's boss. Okay. At the same time, Russian Defense Minister Belyusov has arrived in Beijing, China, for talks with China's military political leadership on behalf of Putin. I wonder if the timing had anything to do with that, but more to the point, what is he going to be walking away with? What agreements for weapons or material or component parts or whatever else is he going to get from China? Okay, let's shift our gears. Second big story. This is in UATV. North Korea is preparing to blow up roads leading to South Korea. Now, this is according to South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff. The military has detected that North Korea is placing coverings along roads in preparation for explosions. It's quite possible that the explosions in North Korea may occur as early as October 14th. Now, so why would they be doing that? So South Korea doesn't invade? I don't think South Korea is in any frame of mind to invade North Korea, but they are doing this. Now, it's a double-edged sword, right? If they do that, that means that it would be harder for North Korea to actually use troops to invade South Korea across the demilitarized zone as well. But I don't see any reason, I mean, other than raising anger and ire in North Korea about South Koreans, I just don't see it. What will probably happen if there becomes any kind of hot war, and I don't anticipate one at this point, would be an exchange of missiles more than anything else, rather than actual troops across the border. But okay, we'll see what goes on there. Third big story, Orban plans to derail loan for Ukraine to help Trump, according to Politico. Okay, so what's going on here? Hungary's prime minister is preparing a political move to help Donald Trump wriggle out of a $50 billion loan and convince U.S. voters that, quote, he won't give Ukraine a dime, unquote, if he becomes president. The loan is planned to be repaid with frozen Russian assets, but to do so, the U.S. demands that sanctions against Russia be extended for 36 months. Orban, however, refuses to support the proposal. Now, remember, in the EU, Orban is in charge of the rotating council. I'm not sure I have the language right. There's multiple different bodies that have to sign off on things, just like in our Congress, we have the House and the Senate, and then the president has to sign. So Hungary is right now in charge of the rotation of the body that different nations chair, and so he's slowing down the works. And he has the ability to do that from where he sits right now, at least temporarily until like December or January. Here's another article talking about the same thing. Hungary plans to block $50 billion loan in an effort to help Trump. And yeah, so it's the same kind of thing here. Now, this is Peter Sakharov, the foreign minister of Hungary. He gave an interview to Russian propaganda media. He told the Russian audience that if Ukraine were accepted into NATO, that it would mean World War III. And you can only imagine just how much airtime and attention this is going to get from the Russians, who, love to hear that he's making their talking points for them. So here we are. We're going to listen to this. Okay.
From the very beginning of the war, we have drawn some red lines. And one of these red lines is that we have to do our best and utmost in order to avoid any form of direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. Because in case such a direct confrontation takes place, easily can end up in the outbreak of the Third World War. And I'm quite sure that no one would like to, or at least normal people would not like to experience it, right?
Now, on its face, that sounds fairly reasonable. We don't want a war between NATO and Russia. Okay, but what's the best path of getting there? Is it to appease Russia, or is it to prevent Russia from doing more than what Russia's already doing?
So, in case Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, that would mean a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia, and that would mean Third World War, and we just simply want to avoid that. So this is, for us, it's a non-existing issue on the agenda.
Okay, so, and one country can keep Ukraine out of NATO membership, and it looks like if Slovakia is not going to be the country saber-rattling, trying to get concessions from Ukraine with gas and oil last week, then Hungary will do the same thing. Okay, meanwhile, it's just like the autocratic nations are just emboldened right now, and this is a time where Biden is bringing forward this idea. President Biden said that the U.S. is ready to engage in nuclear talks with Russia, China, and North Korea. The U.S. aims to reduce nuclear arsenals and addressing escalating rhetoric that has followed Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Do you think that autocrats want to talk about reducing the number of nukes, or do you think that autocrats and would-be autocrats all around the world are thinking, how can I get my hands on a nuke? Because if I had a nuke, I could do to Ukraine what Russia's doing to Ukraine, because I could threaten them with nukes. It's almost insane. Russian media is laughing at Biden's naivety this morning as he calls to negotiate with Russia on nuclear weapons. Biden still has no idea what Russia, North Korea, China, Iran are going for total destruction of the U.S. and Europe no matter what. Okay, that's commentary from Jay in Kyiv, but the idea that they're thinking, sure, that's a great idea, let's reduce our nuclear stockpile, is just absurd. This is Dmitry Medvedev answering. Biden says he wants to negotiate with Russia on reducing SNF, that's strategic nuclear forces. However, the U.S. is waging an almost full-scale, not hybrid, war against us. No, they're not. And seeks Moscow's strategic defeat. Well, possibly, yeah. Negotiating nuclear arms reduction with the U.S. is as useful as discussing a truce with Hitler in 1945. No, that's wildly absurd. But there are signals that have been sent that have shown that we're just not willing to do everything that we need to do in order to help Ukraine succeed. This is Garry Kasparov saying that, as Thaddeus Stevens wrote of Buchanan, now he's talking about President Buchanan, the 15th president of the United States. He was the president just before Lincoln and just before the Civil War. As Thaddeus Stevens wrote about Buchanan, suspected of sabotaging Northern readiness via inaction, quote, "Every drop of blood that shall be shed in the conflict would sit heavy on his soul forever." That is Biden's legacy in Ukraine and the war expansion to come. Inaction is a choice. That's very true. Inaction's a choice. And Jay in Kyiv echoes this. Biden's legacy will be the massacre of Ukraine, the most pro-American country in Europe, destroyed over one man's cowardice. Well, Biden has the ability to allow things that he's not allowing because he has been deterred by Russia. And that's just where we are. All right, that's all that I have, my friends. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.